What's up, storytellers? I'm Clark Rowanson, the Magic Engineer, and it's time to talk about magic. In this video, we have another installment in Spells and Specialists, where we use stories and magic to teach technical topics and communicate science. So we just finished part 1, where we talked with Max about veterinary science and his his desired specialization, his interests, and just kind of went off on a variety of tangents. But I am, as always, joined by the eco-friendly magus, Lovis. How you doing, Lovis?
Hi. Yes, I am here, and I am fascinated by all things pet nutrition at the moment. I have made many, many notes.
Yeah, we had some very interesting conversations about that in part 1, which you can find on Ecofectology. So yeah, Max, in case they skipped that video despite all of the numerous hints and cards and links and all of those things that I'm dropping into the video, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi there. I'm Max Farmer. I'm a veterinarian, a small animal general practitioner over in Wisconsin. And at night, I masquerade as a LitRPG and cultivation author, known as Maxwell Farmer. And if you like veterinary medicine, but also want to get a taste of like LitRPG, fun fantasy adventure, I do have a finished trilogy known as Dr. Druid, which you can find on Amazon and Audible.
Which is why you may hear me refer to him as Maxwell, and it's actually just Max, because I met him as Maxwell at a writing conference, and so my brain doesn't distinguish that very well,
Does
apparently.
not compute.
Both work. I answer to both.
Yeah, so last time we talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and before we get into the seed crystal, which is what this is all about, because we're going to build the basics of a whole magic system, and then in part 4 we are going to put that magic system and these concepts into a story, and it's always a great time. Before we do that, I just want to revisit the take-home lessons that we had from part 1, which there are 3 take-home lessons, and we even discussed a target audience, which is new. We don't always do that, at least not with this level of clarity, so I'm interested in that. So take-home lessons are, 1, that while animals are part of our family, they aren't people. They don't think like people, they don't react like people, and they have different needs from people. 2 is nutrition is very important, and understanding that domesticated pets are not wild animals and don't need to be fed like wild animals. Part 3 is the idea that veterinary science is actually a people job, not just an animal job, which makes perfect sense because you have to deal with I'll be generous and say just the anxious and panicky pet owners. Sometimes the crazy ones too, but everybody when they go to the vet is usually anxious and worried about something wrong with their animal. And that's kind of the worst case to be dealing with people. So anyway, we were talking about the target audience because a lot of what, Max, you're saying a lot of what your goal here is a lot of education and dealing with some of the misinformation that can happen around a lot of this. And with that, we actually looked at wanting to target new pet owners, specifically people in their late teens or to mid 20s who are either like entering college, leaving college. Yeah, generally somebody who's getting their pet for the first time. That's the target audience, and then narrowing it down a little bit into this age range.
Yep.
And that's what we had talked about before. So now we have to completely shift gears and work this and find the seed crystal that we're all going to be excited about.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I always like to do with this is, as we were going through the last part, I keep track of interesting terms and interesting phrases.
Yeah.
And there weren't as many written down because I was just listening, learning, and I was distracted from my distraction. But some of the things that really stood out were hydrolyzed dog food. Obviously, it doesn't have to be dog food, but I'm liking the term hydrolyzed that we might be able to tie in somewhere. the phrase that food is medicine. And I wrote down the quote that not every pet owner is crazy, but every crazy person seems to have a pet. So I don't know if that's going to be relevant at all, but it
we'll
stuck
put
out
it
to
into
me.
part 4 somewhere, I'm sure.
No worries. I actually did have an idea for a seed crystal, like already just prepping myself.
So real quick though, I do want to get the other if there were any other interesting terms or phrases. Lovis, was there anything else that really stood out to you?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I was fascinated by all of the talk about nutrition and everything that we talked about. That is kind of the rabbit hole that we went down. And this whole kind of not treating so much, but if you know that a certain breed is prone to a certain disease, then you can feed them a certain type of food, and that will lower the risk of that disease or condition. I thought that was really interesting. The way that we have bred pets to look a certain way or to perform a certain action has made them prone to some of those conditions, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was cool.
What about you, Max? Are there any like particular terms that you really like?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it kind of, I was trying to kind of prepping ahead for this, just making sure I was ready. I tried to find kind of a theme that tied in a lot with those, in particular. And there may be a better word for it, but my thought process was about how we have instituted change into animals, and that has made them at risk or prone for certain things, but it's also helped them to adapt and become successful at certain things, whether that is hunting or, smelling, whatever it may be, even just for companionship. There's some animals like the French Bulldog was like the first dog, if I'm not mistaken, built for pure companionship, if I'm not mistaken, during the Industrial Revolution. And so, everybody has their own kind of, every animal has their own kind of specialization in that way. But we've worked them to do that, and it's all intrinsically tied to people. At the end of the day, like the bulldog would not naturally exist in the world. We have made the bulldog. And so my thought process a lot about this, so like with thinking about a seed crystal, was potentially about like evolution in a way, that may be too much of a thing, because I'm just thinking change over time. But I was thinking, and the ramifications of that, whether, it's like, I in my head too, Lovis, I had skipped over to part 4 in my head, and I was thinking like, what if there was like something that would turn from like a bull to a minotaur, and now it's dealing with all these kinds of things, and like, but he's not a human, and he doesn't need all these things, but he doesn't always think like this, and so it was just, I went off on a tangent in my own head. But
keep that thought though. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, and so I had thought about, and there may be a better one, but that was just what at least first kind of came to my head, that I felt like it stuck, that kind of glued it all together. There may be something better, maybe, better with tied around people, but I thought about like, about change or evolution and like the consequences of that. And I'm not saying, again, anything crazy of that nature, but like, change over time. That's the technical definition of evolution, So,
okay.
This would be like selective breeding rather than like selective survival.
Exactly. Yeah, as we talked about, like with stray dogs, in that kind of way. Versus, like, hey, this one has a cool coat color. I want this one for, like it just,
right.
Yeah,
right.
They don't always match or equate.
Okay. All right, so we've got a couple other seemingly random ideas, and we can really get into the seed crystal stuff. When you are starting on a story, what is it that usually sparks your ideas? Is it having a specific conflict in mind? Is it you develop your character first? Do you have like a specific plot moment, a specific part of the world? Is there something that consistently is required or the hub of your ideas that turn into stories?
Yeah, I would say it's usually a character concept that drives a story, in that kind of way. So like with Dr. Druid, it's like, hey, this guy's a veterinarian in a fantasy world, and he's a healer, in that kind of way. And so like kind of something different in that kind of regard. And so usually it's a strong character or cool character idea usually is what, and then I try to build a world that could help with character growth and those kinds of things. So I really like that. That's typically how I first get the inspiration. I usually have I have a small leather notebook that I write cool ideas down so I don't forget them, and then I can like splice things together later on. And so I have that. But it's typically I first form a character, like a character concept, whether like it's a cool magic power or what, and then I'm like, okay, what
Like
can I build a world around?
that bull-turned minotaur, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Okay. So I have another question, which I think I have worked out a better way to ask it than I have in the past. So all of our stories have multiple elements in them, right? Character, plot, setting, theme, genre elements, and all of that. If you were reading a book that was solid C minuses across the board except for one aspect, what would that one aspect be? Which one would you choose? So like, what's that one that if it's an A plus, you'll overlook the rest being a C minus?
Okay, good question.
Because we don't want to go below C minus, because at that point it just starts to distract, and it doesn't matter how good this other thing is. But C,
Distinctly average is fine.
yeah, this other stuff, it's okay, but this
Yeah.
one part is really good. What's that one part you want to be really good? Is it still the character?
It's the main character.
Still the
It's
main
the-
character. Okay.
I would say a close second would be action. Like I'm big into action and combat and stuff. If you can
Okay.
put that as its own kind of, that'd be like a close second. Like if the exciting part's boring, I'm just like, why am I?
Okay. So not drama, action, adventure.
Yes. Oh yes.
Okay. All right. So what about preferred types of magic? Do you prefer monsters? Do you prefer advanced tech? Do you prefer advanced tech that looks like magic that looks like advanced tech? Something
Yeah.
like our LitRPG, are like game systems really where it's
Yeah.
at, or what's your preferred
I-
form?
Yeah, I like fantasy, and that can be kind of in different ways, but I prefer fantasy over sci-fi, personally.
Okay.
So I prefer magic over tech, and that kind of aspect. Now I'm not opposed to tech, but I usually would prefer more like enchantment versus like technological advancement in that way. But that's how. And yes, I love monsters. I love that kind of thing. I'm very much a fantasy, and yes, I mean, I'm, and I know that can kind of go in different angles, whether that is again, like cultivation fantasy or LitRPG. Those are the main two that I read. I read just also straight fantasy as well. But that would be kind of, swords and sorcery over like tech and guns.
Okay. So with that, I'm gonna try and do this a little different. This is something that we started doing with our last episode, which was actually with Rachel.
Yeah.
When I'm coaching people, because I also do freelance coaching for writers. Basically, if something is harder than you think it should be, or something is stopping you from writing, we should talk. If it's magic systems, we should absolutely talk.
Yeah.
And I should say, if it's magic systems, we need to talk. So
He will fix it.
with what we have said here, I think where we probably need to start, and this is going to help us in part 4, is I think we should start with a character concept. Find a number of character concepts and then use that to turn it into a seed crystal. So rather than it being, because the types of seed crystals I often end up with are things along the line of X, like descriptor, magic, where this kind of thing happens.
Yeah.
I think we're probably going to end up with yours, something being like this kind of character who has to deal with this kind of quirky magic. Is what it's sounding more in line for what's going to get you interested.
Yeah.
So with that, I guess let's talk characters. What kind of is there a particular character arc or a particular type of character you really enjoy?
You know, I mean, I would say I always enjoy a classic underdog for sure. You know, starts off weak, has to work to get strong, and becomes stronger than the strong. That's always a classic. Like a Lyndon in because I think you read that one, right? The Will White.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've read the first
like,
one.
yeah, Soulbound or Unsold.
Unsold. Yeah.
Yeah, so like Lyndon in that one is a good example. My other kind of one that I like is kind of the anti-hero aspect. It's kind of actually how I did Dr. Druid in particular, is kind of an anti-hero in that way. So kind of like, screw the rules, I'm going to do it like this. You know, like, even if you don't like it, this is how I think it should be done. And so those are the two that I typically like to do. I always like it. I always have kind of a personal enjoyment is when somebody like takes advantage of the rules of said system and uses it for their benefit in some form or fashion, just like in an unconventional way, and like
finds loopholes and stuff.
Exactly. Yes. A loophole exploiter. That's there's jokes I could say, but I'm not.
That's pretty classic in a lot of LitRPG readers.
Yeah, there are a lot of jokes. But I would say that's something I gravitate towards for sure. A main character that has like everything going for them, or like, you know, sometimes like there are some, and they're not bad. This is sometimes not always what I gravitate towards, like a character who starts off with a lot of support. In that way, sometimes doesn't turn me on to the story as much. And they're not bad. It's just not necessarily always my go-to factor for sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's it's an odd thing. That's fairly common in lit RPGs. People like the exploration, and I don't necessarily want to say exploitation, but taking advantage of aspects of the system.
Yeah,
it is finding how it works and finding the clever ways to use it. That's very common. That's not me as much, and that's also very evident in how I play games. Just as a side tangent, because that was one of the things when Skyrim first came out 12 years ago.
Crazy.
That hurts a little. Anyway, when it came out, there was a big thing of people were immediately talking about the crafting loop that you could develop, because you could use alchemy to get better at you could use alchemy to make potions for blacksmithing and for enchanting, and then you could use enchanting to get better at alchemy and blacksmithing. And so you could go in this alchemy enchanting loop until you had something that augmented your blacksmithing by like 10,000 fold and make daggers that were more powerful than any of these other weapons were supposed to ever be. And people were running off at that, which is exploiting the loophole in the system. And the second I found that, I just stopped doing it. I was like, okay, new rule for my own gameplay. I'm not using alchemy to support enchanting. Because that was a whole tangent thing, but
we do those.
Yeah.
Just to let you know.
Probably not relevant, but I was excited to talk about it. So I don't know, is there anything else that stands out to you in terms of characters and characters' interaction with magic?
Yeah. I like the idea, and I guess it can depend on the character of it, like affecting the character, you know, like either like reaching like a certain tier and wanting to evolve per se, or this was a cool character idea I just had while we've been talking. It was one of the ones that I had written down in my head before, but instead of evolving, like something devolves. And so like a man turning into a caveman per se, in order to get more strength and things like that. Or, you know, kind of semi-bestial kind of person or something. It was just, I thought about that because I thought that'd be a cool way, and the kind of like a different kind of way in that whatever type of world, like with a character I would like to read, like, hey, everybody else is like going up or doing this kind of stuff, and this guy's like, I'm actually doing that like in a different way that you're not expecting. And so that was the other in particular, but no, I think you hit on the nail on the head pretty well.
Okay. I'm gonna throw an idea out for the seed
Sure.
for the seed crystal.
Yeah.
And I always feel weird because I want this to be like our magic system, not me. So before I do that, I want to ask if people I should start by asking if anybody has ideas on a starting point for a magic system from what we have talked about here. Because if not, I'll toss out my idea and we can start spinning off that. But I don't want it to just be Clark builds the system he wants over and over.
No, I think, I think I've already kind of said it. Like, I like the idea of kind of change or evolution kind of stuff, but that may be too simple or too broad. I don't know. That was the only thing I could think of, really, off the top of my head.
Okay. Lois, anything?
I don't know. I'm still on the nutrition thing because then it just seemed like something that would lend itself to some really cool magic and also like really cool specializations of magic. I always like when there's like a broad it's like a science basically, where there's a broad magic system where you can specialize, you can apply the magic to different things, and that nutrition would be one of the ways that you can apply this magic. So maybe it's something that allows you to, I don't know, see how certain foods affect an animal apart from the obvious.
Yeah. I guess it could be go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was thinking, I guess you could even think about it like kind of what Clark had said too about like an alchemist or something, like, basically putting a chef as a subsect of alchemy if you wanted to. Because technically you're changing things, and how that could affect, like, or even like some sort of weird specialty alchemist that is like a chef based or something. I don't know, but that's a cool idea.
Yeah, so, just because you just said chef, I'm immediately thinking of characters and what they're doing. But like a chef that notices that the certain food that they throw out in the dumpster or something is like the strays are really reacting funny to it or something.
Yeah.
It's just, but that's not really a magic system. That's just normal. But yeah, I don't know, something that allows them to and the magic is like a tool that they use.
Okay.
In like a veterinary scenario.
Okay. I'm excited about this. Let's see what you guys think.
Okay.
This is shamelessly pulling off of the animal bond trope that you see a lot in magic. I'm wondering if we could do a magic system where it doesn't have to be the stereotypical animal bond, but there's some kind of animal bond so that the animal you bond with and the health of that animal gives you evolutionary adaptations that you can manifest on yourself.
Okay.
So, like, not full shapeshifting, but things like if I bond with a dog, starting to do the things of I am evolving my sense of smell, or I'm choosing to evolve my sense of hearing. And depending on how we wanted to get into it, we could talk details of whether you can only do like one of these things per animal, how many animals you can get. If you wanted to put it in LitRPG, it can be as you level up, you unlock more bond slots so that you can have more companions.
Yeah.
But the reason I was thinking that, like, the health and the nature of the animal, because then you can have that character who does really pay attention to the nutrition, who they use that to get the absolute most out of their bond, keep themselves and this other creature healthy, and do all kinds of very interesting stuff, which would be really funny if they end up with, you like underdogs, if they end up with a seemingly useless animal.
I was gonna say, or like a completely starved, sick animal that they now have to like bring back to full health so that they can smell properly.
So I don't know. How are you guys feeling about that?
I think it's cool.
Yeah, I like that.
I would guess then I kind of went back over So would the one story perspective or the one character perspective be the Minotaur, like the bull, like after, like does it also change the animal then too? Could the bull then turn into a human bull, like a Minotaur in that kind of way? Now, granted, that's just one character idea. I was just throwing out there, but I was
So
just.
you have to keep yourself healthy too, so that your animal bond would remain healthy.
That's true, and then I just think about. Granted, this is we haven't even said on this yet, but I'm like, okay, what happens if the animal dies? Can it be a spirit of an animal? And it be
Maybe
the
you don't have to bond to a specific animal.
Okay.
Like depending on the direction we wanted to go, this could be very much about you developing a menagerie of connections, right? Which I think is a theme that I'm starting to see a lot in spells and specialist stuff, is we like having these connections outward. Or it could be something as simple as you have to like study and train, and you bond with the essence of the species, not a specific animal, and then that changes you. And what people haven't been paying attention to is that also changes your needs.
Oh.
So yeah, he's a Minotaur, and most people don't pay attention to what that changes in terms of dietary needs, in terms of climate needs, and potentially in terms of psychological needs.
So now he has to eat a lot of grass.
He just chews cud all the time.
He just chews cud, grows a second stomach.
or even like, this is something where Max, if you wrote this, you would be able to pull in all kinds of stuff. Some of those genetic predispositions of things like that, or just like if he takes the essence of a dog, he has that pancreatitis issue. He can't eat heavy fat foods as much as he used to.
That's a cool. I do like the idea of that, because then I think in my head about like there could be different schools like that train, because I'm like assuming like like maybe like getting like becoming evolved is only like for the entitled or something like that, and like you typically get trained in like the school of the hound or something. I don't know, just kind of throw this and that way they kind of like all these people like have this kind of dog quality sort of stuff or something like that.
This is suddenly giving me very strong wuxia vibes of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, just the school of the striking snake, right?
Yeah.
As you go there and everybody learns to bond and evolve along the trend of snakes, and that is their fighting style and their way of being.
And there's probably in the society like a snobbery, right? You want to bond with like a purebred dog, or you want to bond with like the wildest animal or something. And then you have someone, because if you're interested in this underdog character who finds loopholes and stuff, you'd have someone who's like, well, I can't afford to go to those big schools or like to buy these purebred pets that have to be like Kennel Club certified and stuff.
Right.
So I'm gonna bond with that mangy little mutt here.
Yeah. No, I really like this.
And then you're like, oh crap, no, I don't like it.
Yeah.
But actually, that would probably, the fact that they're like more genetically diverse might mean that they're less prone to some of the diseases that purebred breeds are prone to.
I even had, if you wanted to throw in like bestial monsters in there, because I just like when you talk, I took in my head when you talked about that, I had the idea of like there could be traveling merchants or something like that, and like, hey, you want your kid to get the best success here? Come check out our wide menagerie of creatures. And then like he attempts to sneak in and like finds a hydra, and so he has like he's like one of these rarities that like he accidentally kind of like stole a hydra spirit or something like that, and that way he can like actually use like multiple styles, because like or not a hydra, a chimera, so like has some lion, has some goat, has some snake in that kind of way.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that's cool.
I do like the idea of being a specific animal though, because then you can talk about specific conditions or something. You have to feed them certain foods or something like that. Because if it's
he gets a fat schnauzer as his thing. He gets a fat little street schnauzer, and I can't have any bacon.
And I think there's lots and lots of room we could play with that, because without giving away any of the cards, Max and I have been talking about a system that can get kind of similar to this. But you could do it where you might have multiple people connected to single animals. So like if there's a school of the dragon, the way it works is everybody in that school is bonded to that singular dragon. Or then, and depending on how complex you want to make the magic system, right? There could be differences between being a singular bond or a multifaceted bond, whether you're bonding to like a pack or a group as opposed to an individual.
Oh, that's a
Like
cool concept.
you could have that shape some of the things, but the core of it is you get connected to an animal, and that changes who you are. And as that connection strengthens, the changes become more potent and more pronounced.
That's cool. I like the idea of maybe even it being kind of like puberty to adulthood kind of situation. Like, oh, you're turning 18, you can get your bond now, kiddo. And because I like the idea of like kind of having it with a companion, but I also like the idea of it like almost more to like a spirit or kind of like a one-time thing. I'm trying to think like, yeah, say if this is a school of striking snake, but there's like, and maybe this is something, it very much reminds me of what we talked about before too, Clark, but like a higher tiered creature that like, okay, like this one can have the bonds with a bunch of other people, in that kind of way or something. That's just something that I'm thinking off my head.
Or maybe it's just,
Also, go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe it's just time around the animal. So that's where the evolution change over time comes into play. Is you spend time around the animal and you start to literally take on the aspects of that animal. And that way it can kind of be undone. If you start distancing yourself from certain animals, or if you change course, right? You spend time over here and then you develop over here and you end up with aspects of both.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Lovis, because I think.
Well, I was just wondering like where they would use these abilities that they get, whether it's like a competition or like a tournament that they train for, kind of like a Hunger Games type of thing, where they have to use their abilities. And if you're interested in people using loopholes, this character that isn't bonded to like the super high strength purebred creatures, but can really use the abilities of the creatures he or she or they are bonded to in super clever ways. Like I think that would be really cool.
For sure.
Achieve the same thing. And that's why I like the idea that you had, Clark, about having different slots so that you could like gather like a little, like your own little pack, your little clan of different animals.
That could be cool, because I'm just thinking about like the civilization, like involved with that, like, and I did like how you talked about like, like my family's bonded to the Cavalier, in that kind of way, and
we all have heart disease.
But just kind of in that way, because I'm trying to think in particular about the dynamics of like having a pack with you like all the time in that kind of way.
So sorry, go ahead.
No worries. But I thought about as well, just to make kind of things maybe a little bit better in that kind of way, like like either it could be like every animal only can ever give one like bond, like no, like every animal, I mean, yes, they can have bonds with other people, but every animal can only have one bond unless they're like, I don't know, the first snake of the world or something. I don't know, something like that. So they can have the schools, but every animal can only have one bond. And so that way you have to die if like if he like, I was thinking like he has to like, if he accidentally steals a bond and like, hey, he's a fugitive, he stole, kill him so this thing could bond with something else. In that kind of way. It was just a thought.
Also, you'd have to earn the trust of the creature in order for it to give you its bond.
Okay.
which is harder if you're not there at birth, like if, like you have a puppy versus you find a stray.
Okay. Now, a lot of this is detail stuff that could vary from system to system. So I want to pull back a little bit.
Okay.
And as I say that, I'm going to immediately get back to the specifics. I like the idea of you are in some way taking responsibility of this creature, because I'm thinking back to the audience of people with new pets, right?
That's a good point. Very good point.
So if there's some kind of responsibility where you get this evolution and this development, and their growth is stunted. So that's something where if you bond with something that's traditionally an incredibly powerful creature, it's not going to develop to its incredibly powerful form, because you are taking its potential for yourself, and that means you have to be its guardian.
It'd be like it reminds me of like His Dark Materials in a way. Like everyone has like a daemon, right?
Yeah. And you can end up that's another series that comes up a lot. And
yeah, we do tend to mention that one once or twice.
But anyway, so lots of different directions we could go. So, but pulling back to the seed crystal, it's sounding like it's something along the lines of, struggling with the exact words. I guess the other thing I have is, Lovis, how are you feeling about this concept? Because I think Max and I are definitely getting fired up about it. Is it triggering ideas for you, or is there something that's not quite?
It is triggering ideas for me. It's triggering story ideas for me.
Okay.
For sure. And like vibe ideas, because you could easily do action adventure with this. With like your band of animals. But I'm also seeing a lot of like class differences, and which would be really cool world building.
Okay.
I even
Go ahead.
thought this is just a nuance. This is not anything like specific in that way. But I was just thinking, what if every creature? This is actually in a way kind of stealing from Dr. Druid. But what if like every creature that you get like a bond to, like, can turn into like a little tiny like mini version? So like
that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, like you have this giant bull. You can't just walk around like this town with this like 15,000 pound like monster bull just walking around. It's like you're not gonna fit inside a building. And so then I was like, what if you had like every time they bonded, they were just like, oh,
a very Pokemon image, isn't
very
it?
Pokemon-esque in that way.
We could do your cozy, Lovis.
Yes.
Where they're all little tiny, so you end up with
perfect for a cozy.
You end up with a tiny little Hydra.
Yes,
with
and you just have
heads.
this like street urchin with his band of strays, the underdog in a competition. It's wonderful.
This is cool.
As I always do, I always jump ahead to part 4. Always.
Okay, so what about this as the seed crystal? People can bond with creatures and monsters to develop their own, to develop their traits and powers over time. That's not entirely clear.
To evolve their traits and to gain magical abilities and evolve them over time.
So that's what it is. To gain the traits and powers of their companion over time. Okay, yeah. So to gain their traits and powers over time, but they must maintain the health and well-being of their bonded.
As well as with the power comes a trade-off of also gaining the weakness of their...
that's a good point.
Okay.
So like, you
traits,
have...
powers, and weaknesses.
Like, I thought, you have a naked mole rat as your companion, and like, you are a great burrower, but your vision is getting worse, and you're really sensitive to sound now. Like, your hearing's a lot better, but now you're almost like too sensitive. And so
I love that.
Yeah.
Better bond with a hawk or something to get really good eyesight.
Right. Or you could go like ultra specialized, and like you end up bonded with like a mole and a bat.
Yep.
And so you constantly have to have earplugs in, but at the same time, they have you on watch duty all the time, because and like you can see in the dark, you can always hear what's going on, you can track people just with hearing.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, yeah, I don't know, how do we feel about that seed crystal?
I like
like
it.
Okay. So again, what we've got is people can bond with creatures, and I'm just going to say animals and monsters, to gain their traits, powers, and weaknesses over time, but they must maintain the health and well-being of their bonded. And that's where we can really pull in the nutrition, and where, depending on if the writer was up for it, pull in some of the psychological aspects of like, you're able to communicate, but there are these points where they are very clearly not human.
Yes.
Which can lead to some interesting things where if you're taking on their traits, that could lead to some interesting stuff where, one, you have to do things for their well-being that make you very uncomfortable, but also over time your needs might change to that, so that you end up in a weird situation and you stop and look at it and you're like, what? I'm sitting
This
on
is
a
not
pile.
socially acceptable.
Like, I'm sitting on a pile of rotten meat. I don't, or here's something where it's like, I am high up in a tree hanging by 1 foot. Why?
Why do I do this? Also, in any given situation, depending what you're bonded to, you might have the instinct to fight and flight at the same time, and then you're just like,
Yeah, from different things.
frozen in the middle. You
Yeah.
don't know which instinct to listen to.
Yeah,
And
you're
I like the
connected to a
idea-
type of bird, and then there's somebody who's very, very clearly connected to a feline, and you're just like, oh,
We're not gonna be in the same room.
I thought about this as well, is that like, just say like a person can have like at most 3 bonds, but there's also a school of thought, and that can kind of go with this, the different like schools, is that like, if you're only bonded to one, technically your bond could be stronger in that way, so there's kind of like different kind of schools of thought in that particular regard, or
Yeah.
maybe it's a social stigma in that way. I just
Yeah.
thought that could be a cool concept too.
Yeah, well, and if we were looking at LitRPG, it could be that there is a set amount of stats change over time. And if you have multiple creatures, then these stat changes being spread over more changes. Whereas
And
if
I
you have
imagine
one
you need
person-
more resources of some description, right?
Right,
To care for all of those.
Yeah, I'm not responsible for just taking care and understanding this one creature. I now have to manage 3 of them, all with their own little unique idiosyncrasies and needs. And plus, they're not people. They are like people in the sense that every animal has its own personality and has its own traits. And so there's all of that complexity in terms
Would it
of
also be
maintaining them.
kind of Pokemon-esque in that you can only use the trait when the animal is like there,
Is out.
present, is out?
Squirtle, use water gun. That's an idea. I thought in
We could
particular.
Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I was just kind of thinking about how to make this more viable too. Is that I thought about, you could take the creatures that form the bonds, or like specific creatures or something like that, like in that kind of way, like some call them like sacred beasts or demon beasts or whatever it may be, and that way they like, not every creature, like not every cow can form a bond, but like something that has been touched by one of this, or like is considered a certain kind of thing, or it has like little traces, like like maybe the street dog, like their great grandfather dog was one, and so they have like this little flicker of this bond element, and that their true form is like a spirit or something like that. Like they don't feel any issues in that way. Like they still want to come out and things like that, but they don't always have to walk around and be like, always have to do 100% the dog stuff all the time. Like, oh crap, I'm going to climb up this mountain that's a vertical peak. This dog has no ability to climb up this mountain. Well, good thing is, like, I can turn to its
Better get my mountain
spirit
goat.
form. Yeah. Like, but it turn into like its spirit form, and then it can just hang out inside me or something like that.
And I think that would probably depend a lot on personal preference. And that's where like different authors could go in different directions. Because you could do something where you legit meld with them. So you are now one being. And then there's these separate minds and these separate urges in you that you're having to manage and deal with all of that. So like you haven't destroyed them, right? You haven't just killed them, and they can be separated out into their own creature, which could be some very interesting stuff in terms of animal rehabilitation and rescue. Where it's like
True.
your job is you bond with traumatized animals,
Yeah.
help them restabilize, recover, and then you separate from them and let them go back out into the world.
Oh, I like that.
Or you could have it where they're kind of like Pokemon, or where they're all with you at all times. There's a number of directions that people could go.
Yeah.
I was kind of, in my head, I was kind of picturing that these changes to you are constant. So like people can look at you and have an idea of what you're connected to.
Yeah. Yeah. They like see like big bad ears on you or something like that.
But yeah, now that I say it, I do like that option of like you meld into one, and then there's these personalities and connections and feelings that you're trying to manage, because that makes it, I don't know, interesting and also more complicated, while you still being able to have that creature to creature interaction of you trying to understand them. And yeah, that's the direction I would go, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I like that. And then having, kind of a version of the creature that they can take care of, and kind of understanding those things as well.
Because then it introduces like a limitation, if we're talking about magic, that like the more voices you have in your head, the harder it probably is to stay sane. And so people who like bond with many are crazy. Like you can have a literal crazy cat lady.
Yeah. Oh, that you can. I feel like that'd be a good villain right there.
Yeah.
Just like,
And set his pack of wild dogs on you.
I could even go with a combination of that and the Pokemon approach, where you get the attributes while you are merged, but then you can separate for a time if you need to. So like if you need them out for a specific reason, like you do that, you lose all the traits, and then you don't regain the traits until you remerge. So in that case, you are the Pokeball. Anyway, we're getting deep into the details, but I think we have definitely hit the seed crystal.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty pleased, because despite the length of this episode, I still think this might be one of the fastest arrivals to an actual seed crystal we may have gotten. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, I think that's a good place. One more time, I'm going to reiterate the base seed crystal and then add a little bit more of the nuance. The base seed crystal is that people can bond with animals and monsters to gain their traits, powers, and weaknesses over time, but they must maintain the health and well-being of their bonded. And this bond, from what we had talked about here, happens by merging the entities into a single body. And they can be separated and all the fun stuff that goes with that. So we're going to take all of that into the next episode for the next time we sit down and record, and we're going to look at the magic system blueprint and figure out things like how prevalent this is in the world. Do we want that kind of spirit aspect that's going to make it so it's a smaller subset of creatures and monsters that you can bond with? How does that work? So yeah, we're going to talk about that next time. So until then, the next video will be on my channel here at The Magic Engineer. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, go over to Lovis's channel of Ecofectology. Make sure you like and subscribe while you're there. And do consider liking and subscribing while you're here, too, if you haven't already.
You definitely should.
You should.
And to close this out, Max, where can people find you? Do you want them to find you? I don't know.
Yes. No, I'm happy to chat with people and such. Yeah, you can find me over, you can reach out on my website, maxwellfarmer.com. You can reach out over there and I will get back to you. And that's the biggest way you can reach out right now. I'm working on building the Discord. There will hopefully be a link attached to the video at some point. And yeah, that's where you can reach me.
Excellent.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for staying through on one of these extra long episodes. Hopefully we will see you next time. But until then, whatever else you do, keep writing and stay awesome. What we want to communicate. Oh my God, I didn't do the tagline right, did I? Oh.
Did you do it at all?
No.
I completely missed that.
I did